consulting is bullshitting.
Why can't organizations solve their own problems?
Are you guys nervous?
I mean, obviously, it's a pretty big deal, right? Going to a billionaire's house and just being there like, oh, we need some money for a project.
Yeah.
All right, we're live. Thank you for being here, Debdoot, Ailiya. I really appreciate you guys coming out. How's life going?
Go.
Great. It's pretty chill. Like, I'm chilling this time. Got easy courses and everything.
Yeah.
For those who may not know, 180 DC is a student-led consultancy for nonprofits and NGOs. For those who may not know about 180 DC, do you guys mind telling us a little bit more about what you guys do?
Sure. So 180 DC is a global organization. It has different chapters across the world in different universities. So we have 180 DC Ashoka, we have 180 DC St. Stephen's, Hansraj, etc. And as you mentioned, we essentially work with nonprofits, impact organizations, CSRs of corporates, etc. And we try to help them maximize their impact. And yeah, so that is the general overview, and we can like answer any questions if you want about that.
What made you guys want to pick up something like this in college?
So, I think for me personally, I've always been interested in impact. Even in my 11th and 12th grade, I was involved in a bunch of initiatives where I was like doing some impact related work. And in Ashoka, like obviously there was a consulting club and everything, but it just didn't seem fulfilling enough because I needed my work to sort of be useful to somebody, to have some sort of impact on people, either on a small scale or a large scale, that does not matter. But some sort of impact had to be there. And I just thought that that sort of fulfillment would come from 180 DC Ashoka, and that's how I joined.
Yeah, I think similar trajectory. I think I was very interested in creating something tangible. We were talking about this earlier. And 180 DC does give you that opportunity to work in a way where you can actually help people on ground. And that's the first thing. Secondly, I think I also wanted to build a career in consulting. So, and that's because I think that my skill set aligns with what you need for consulting. And therefore, in my second year, I decided that, hey, this is the perfect intersection of both of these worlds. And it makes sense for me to apply. And I applied, I got in.
Solid track record. I mean, 10 plus projects in what, 3 years?
Yeah.
That's you guys have been dishing out good work. I mean,
Thank you.
do you mind taking me through how you guys break a problem down for an NGO? How do you approach? What's your methodology like?
Right.
What's your approach to the situation? How do you work?
So usually, like pragmatically, an NGO comes to us with a problem, right? Like we usually do not help them structure the problem down. They come with us with a problem in mind. But the way we structure the solution is essentially like general consulting sort of skills, which is we try to structure it in a messy way. We try to understand like how do we make this exhaustive and exclusive, and we break it down to a degree where we can then pick one problem and then like just focus on it and like act on it. So something as simple as, let's say, an NGO wants to enter a certain part of India. So let's say they are based in a certain part of India, they want to enter Delhi NCR. So how should they go about it, right? So we will then, it becomes like a market entry problem for us, and we structure it accordingly. We understand, hey, like, is it financially viable to do that? What is the scope of impact that we can have in a place like this? What are the shareholders that we can collaborate with, right? What are the levers of impact that we can capitalize on? So brainstorming and then structuring it and then presenting it to the NGO is most of the work that we do. But sometimes it's like they come to us with a specific problem in mind. For example, they want to fundraise for a specific wing of their NGO. And then that is this brute execution. Like we plan out that we're going to like, these are the 5 ways of outreach that we have for fundraising. And we plan out like, okay, so these are the 100 people we're going to send emails to, LinkedIn sort of messages to, call, etc. And then it's just brute force work. It's not so much like intellectual sort of work. But yeah, I think both the intellectual work and the brute work is like equally important in the kind of work that we do. Is that
Same thing, yeah, you've
Same
covered everything.
cool?
It's such a the development sector for that matter. I mean, it's not what things were like, say, 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
And from what I've noticed, at least from my experiences on ground, is that governance is now very flexible with organizations coming from outside to
Right.
step in to like fix things, right? For the longest, there was a huge gap between independent organizations trying to do
Yeah.
work and impact on ground um, versus an institution trying to do it. What about you guys? Have you guys ever faced any such discrepancies? Who are mainly like the stakeholders that you interact with when it comes to getting into consultancy to like frame your agendas and roadmaps?
I think from our experience, that discrepancy still exists, although not to the extent it once used to. So we have a very different way of executing things when it comes to, let's say, a government organization. So currently working with a government organization versus, let's say, a CSR department of a big corporate, right? So even the priorities and the objectives of those projects and the way one is expected to go about it is very different in nature. So that's one. Secondly, I think you're right that a lot of government organizations are coming to, like, let's say, private organizations to increase their efficiency. So even the fact that, let's say, government, like a state government, is working with us right now, I think it points towards a potential like synergy between the government and the private, and um, it's only going to increase from here on. That's my thesis. But uh, but at the same time, there is a conflicting sense of like there's a conflict in this way we work and the way we approach problems and the speed with which we execute problems in both of these areas, from what we have experienced at least. Yeah.
There are a lot of projects that I was reading about what
Mm.
you guys were up to. Do you mind taking us through like one project, how you guys broke down the problem and how you all found a fix to it? I mean, we were talking about IHF earlier
Right.
before we started filming. Do you mind taking us through that
Yeah,
once?
sure. You wanna
Yeah,
do it?
yeah. So last year we worked with IHF, which is the Indian Housing Federation, and basically what they do is poverty alleviation and housing for people in the lower income of India, and they work throughout India actually. And the main challenge they faced was that they were trying to expand a bit more, but they didn't have the funds for that. And they contacted us, and we helped with their entire fundraising project. And essentially, we just thought that as Ashokans, we have an entire network open to us of founders, philanthropists who would be willing to help with this fundraising project. And we reached out to a lot of Ashokan founders actually, and we got a few responses, which is actually a lot higher than the responses that this organization got before they came to us. As students of Ashoka, I mean, we sort of have that privilege that we know that these founders sort of are more receptive to our requests, being like students of their university, right? Um, yeah, so it was basically like a very straightforward problem. Like we just had to help them with fundraising, and we had the network. We did a bunch of outreach, and we were able to visit a bunch of these founders as well. We went to Sanjeev Vichandani's house actually to discuss this project, and that was pretty interesting. Um,
Were
but
you
yeah,
guys nervous?
Sorry.
Were you guys nervous?
I mean, obviously, it's a pretty big deal, right? Going to a billionaire's house and just being there, like, oh, we need some money for a project.
Yeah.
So that was kind of nervous. I mean, we were kind of nervous about that, but it went well. He was very interested in the project, and he was actually like fascinated that a bunch of students like us in Ashoka were helping out this organization. So that was pretty cool to work on, honestly. And you were the head of that, so you
Right,
can
right.
add on.
I think you covered it all. I think for us, we're talking about, right, brute work versus intellectual work. This was like a brute work project where we just had to um, understand the scope of the work and just go at it. And we worked about for like 3 months, and we gave really like solid, tangible opportunities of fundraising to the organization. And we got to learn a lot about the housing sector, the low income housing sector across India. The point of contact that we were working with for the organization, he himself had worked with a lot of governments and like the United Nations, etc. So he had a lot to share, a lot of lessons to like give us as well. So it was very beneficial for both parties. But yeah, I think this is one kind of work, and usually we also do a lot of research projects, primary research, secondary research, both. We also handle social media for a lot of NGOs because it's sort of our domain, like the kind of competencies that we have aligned with social media. marketing, etc. a lot. We also handle finances and like financial strategy making for a lot of organizations. Um, but yeah, essentially, these are the kind of buckets that we work with. We have 7 departments within 180DC. I think we have finance, we have outreach, we have marketing, we have technology. So if any NGO, let's say, wants help in making a website, right, or any kind of tech help, we have our CS majors and we have people who are equipped with that kind of skill set to help them out. And we also have an events team, a collaborations team, etc. So we have like a holistic skill set that can solve any problem for a certain NGO. And the way NGOs sort of approach us, they don't look at us as consultants in the typical way. Like, let's say a company goes to a Deloitte or a BCG or a McKinsey. So they go with a different sort of perspective. I think the way they approach us is more as we are a group of like skilled young individuals who can pick a problem and solve it. And a lot of NGOs also have a dearth of volunteers, right? Like it's a huge problem for them to actually go out there and find volunteers who will produce quality work. So if we can like pick up a entire project for them and say that, hey, we're going to solve it within 2 months, we're going to like execute it as well. It really helps them a lot. So that's the kind of model that we operate on mostly.
I'm really curious. Okay, I was thinking about this earlier also. When you guys say we all do research and a lot of work that you guys do at 180TC is research based,
Right.
essentially, I reject positivism, to be very fair. I feel like numbers can often be very deceiving. Now, for example, if I'm trying to empirically try to break down a problem, say access to sanitation pads in schools for girls. Now I realize that there's a problem and there's a dearth. So I put up a pad station where women and girls from the school can literally, it's a dispenser and they can use it and they can just take a pad out. But I end up putting it in the assembly hall. Now no one's going to use it. There's also been a number of times where you try to break down a problem empirically and it does not really translate into on
For
ground.
sure, yeah.
If I'm trying to bring, say, an ideology or a product or a way of life to a group of people who I know for a fact is going to improve lives for, but they choose to reject it because numbers do deceive
Right,
you,
right,
and
right.
then you often have to face that
Definitely.
societal gap that exists. Have you guys ever come across something like that?
100%, which is why we take care of both ideation and execution, because execution informs ideation. It's like a symbiotic relationship, right? Like we have a framework or a structure in mind, right, which is informed by numbers and data and the primary research that we have done. But once we try to implement that, a lot of like it's like a feedback loop. We get a lot of points that you mentioned about, right? That hey, this should be done like that, and those points of information can only be received once we try to implement it, which is why we make it a point to be actively part of the implementation as well. And I think what ideation helps in is to give a sort of a heuristic to go by, that let's say if a certain organization wants to start a education program, like an employment upskilling program for married women in a certain village, right? If that's the premise, it gives us a certain sense of the number of women involved, right? The kind of resources that we will need, the kind of time we will need, what are the steps that we should keep in mind before entering it. And then once we enter it, the strategy can always be revised and like iterated upon. So yeah, I think it doesn't need to be either or problem, at least for like organizations such as 180DC or impact consulting organizations. You can, your strategy can be informed by the lessons that you get from implementation.
Why consultancy, Debdoot?
She's also a consultant, by the way. She's joining BCG.
Oh,
And he's joining McKinsey.
So
that's huge. Congratulations.
So I think you should go start with that.
Sure. So a lot of people, when they think about consulting, they're just like, oh, you're just like breaking down a huge problem and giving some solutions randomly, blah, blah, blah. But to me, sure, it is breaking down a problem. But also it's about like, what exactly are you going to be doing about the problem, right? Like, a lot of people think of consulting in a very short-term manner. But for me, it's sort of long-term. Like, you're breaking down the problem and you're looking at it in a long-term perspective so that you sort of fix that problem for like the periods that are going to be coming later on, right? What are the impact that you can have breaking down that problem? You can break down the problem into like really small, actionable steps and actually have some sort of impact for like multiple stakeholders, right? And I just feel like that's so interesting, like especially in impact consulting, when you know that the work you do has a huge result in the terms that it plays out after you've broken down the problem and actually pitched a solution. Like you know that the solution is actually going to be implemented. And a lot of the small organizations that come to us for consulting services, like we try to help them maximize their growth and their impact. So it's just honestly a great way to sort of understand what organizations require and provide what exactly their organization requires, right? And um, I just feel like it's a very systematic way of thinking, first of all. And it's not just like, okay, a lot of people say that consulting is bullshitting. Um, but along with that, I feel like along with the bullshit, you are giving something
Along with
that exactly that involves a bit of bullshit. But along with that, you're giving them something that's actually actionable to take away from. And honestly, I just think that that's fulfilling on both ends. Like small organizations are gaining something from us, and we are also gaining a lot in the sense that we're getting that fulfillment first of all, as well as a lot of learning from their end. We're seeing that okay, what exactly do other people that we haven't like faced? What are they going through? So it's just like a lot of things that open our eyes, but also we're learning a lot through this entire process of consulting organizations.
Yeah, I think why consulting can be interpreted as like a personal question, like why should I go into consulting, but like, why does the field exist to begin with? And yeah, that is a question I had when I was starting off. That like, why can't organizations solve their own problems? Like, isn't like right? Like you can just
It's a you problem.
yeah, right. Like why do you need like a bunch of external like folks coming in and like telling you what you should do? You have more knowledge, more like skin in the game. You have a better understanding of what you should do. So the answer to that, I think, is it's a matter of perspective, right? I think once you have stayed with the problem for a long period of time, you start looking at it from a certain perspective, right? You have a relationship with the problem, and it can limit what options are open to you to solve it, right? Especially within an organization, if you're part of that organization, it's very difficult to objectively step back and look at it and understand what can be done, like to make it more efficient, stuff like that. The benefit of having a group of people who are skilled at structuring communication, strategy, etc., is that they can give you that value where they come in from the outside, they look at the organization from an objective perspective, and they can give you a perspective that is distanced in nature, right? Rather than like because they don't have any incentive to prefer a suggestion over the other, as people in the organization might have. That's one. Secondly, what we have experienced in 180DC as well is that after a point, a lot of problems start looking similar. So let's say if there's a fundraising problem, or if it's a social media strategy problem, or if it's a like a geographical location entry problem that you can't enter in this location, the strategy starts looking more and more similar the more you work with different organizations. So if I have worked with IHF in fundraising, tomorrow if some other organization comes to me, I have a general idea of what the market looks like, in the sense that what works and what doesn't work when you pitch for impact organizations, and a general idea of what strategies would work in this case and what would not work, right? And if you do this for 10 times, if you've helped 10 organizations increase their fundraising, the 11th time you will have a very informed perspective about how to go about fundraising that people in a particular organization might not have.
Break it down in an example, no?
Right. So let's say Inspire India, right? You have started this organization, you have worked with it for 2 years. Now, let us say you face a certain bottleneck, which is you are not able to get enough people to work with you. Like you are not able to incentivize or motivate students to join and stick with your organization. That's the problem. Now, as a founder, this is the first time you are facing a problem like this, or even if you are like a seasoned founder, this is the second or third time you're facing a problem like this, and you are very focused and your vision is very limited to your organization and what has worked for your organization. If you come to 180DC, let's say, and if we have helped 8 organizations in the past to increase their engagement rate, to increase the motivation and the number of people who are coming and staying in that organization, we will have a more informed perspective about how to go about that problem than somebody who is facing it for the first or second time. And even when it comes to like what's working in a certain current market scenario, right? Like when it comes to, let's say, financial strategies, like we have worked with multiple companies in the same sector. So if, let's say, agricultural sector, right? Like we have worked with multiple agricultural NGOs that if the next NGO comes to us, we know what framework or we know what kind of like frame we should use to approach that problem, which an individual founder or an individual employee might lack. I think these two are the biggest levers of value for consulting. And individually, I think consulting is great because, as she mentioned, like it you really learn a lot because you're working on like several problems over a short period of time. So you get a lot of exposure to industries, people, different kind of problems, right? And I think communication and like structured critical thinking is a transferable skill that you can use anywhere, even in the future. So yeah.
I want to build on what you said
Right.
earlier when you spoke about, when you use frameworks to solve
Right.
problems.
Right.
And you already have a set
Right.
skeleton that's ready,
Right.
into which you try to, incorporate these new problems and see if there are patterns. If I were to ask you, what's your go-to framework to say put together an impact project?
Right.
What are your go-tos?
I think there is no go-to framework that can be applicable to all organizations without context. But I think thinking principle wise, I can give you a few principles we might use to think about problems. Right. So firstly, what we start with is an in-depth exploration and an in-depth conversation about the organization and about the specific problem in hand. So let's say if you are the founder, we'll talk to you for a couple of hours, right? We'll try to see how the organization has built itself over the last 2 years, who else, what other stakeholders are involved, right? Or what kind of motivations you have for the future of the organization, things like that. So we get a strong intuition of where the organization is heading and what kind of factors are at play. That's step number one.
Call the client discovery phase, where we're just discovering
Yeah.
everything about the client itself.
Yeah. And that goes about for a few weeks. And the second phase is a brainstorming phase. So we'll go to the board, the team will sit together and we'll think about, hey, like what's the best possible way, best possible strategy to go about this. I mentioned MISI in the past. So MISI is a very helpful like way to think about things. So for example, let's say let's stick to the problem of like increasing engagement, right? Now, it's a very vague and a big
Let's
problem.
pick up a social impact.
Okay, all right. Let's pick up the problem of there are not enough students attending a certain government school in a certain village in Haryana. Okay. How do you go about that? And the school comes to us that hey, we need like enrollment rates, and they'll come to us with something like because they themselves might not have a clear idea of what the root problem is. So our job is to understand the root problem for them. So they might say something like, hey, can you work on like a social media strategy or a marketing strategy to increase the number of students who come in? But that might not be the right thing to do to solve the problem of like students coming to the school, right? So the point of the brainstorming phase is to understand what the root cause is. It's called root cause analysis. It's a very like prominent consulting principle that you break the problem down in a way that you get to a bottleneck that is causing all of the offshoots, right? So in this case, right, the first level of thinking can be okay. If students are not coming to this specific school, something as simple as it can either be a teacher problem, right? Or it can be a non-teacher problem. Like there's a very simple way of like A not A of structuring it. That it's either a teacher issue that the teachers are not qualified enough, motivated enough. So we'll go into that deeper, but it's a teacher issue or it's not a teacher issue. So it's a very simple way of breaking it. A more complicated way of breaking it would be Okay, so we have faculty, we have infrastructure, right? We have location, right, where the school is situated, and then we have the student side of issues, that they might face certain n number of issues because of which they can't come to a school, right? And it can be that all of these problems are existing at the same time, like students are facing issues and the teachers are not up to the mark. So that's a more like complicated way of framing it, but something simple would be teacher, not teacher. And then within teacher, it can either be, let's say, an ability problem, or it can be a motivation problem, um, or it can be an opportunity problem, that they are not getting the right opportunities to express their like teaching potential. So then we break it down. It might come down to something as simple as, hey, like you need to increase the teacher salaries, and that will like fix a whole like nest of problems for you. That can be one. Another can be like, let's say, the student perspective. It can be the school is situated in a very like distant location. There are no villages nearby, or there are no sort of communities nearby with young children in it. So you can either relocate your school, right, or you can try to help transportation for those students, right? So, for example, in Ashoka, like the shuttle system, right? Like Ashoka is completely isolated. They have a free shuttle system. People can go to and from Delhi. So, these solutions come from a very structured way of looking at the problem. So, it might seem very like disparate that, okay, transport and teacher salary are like two completely different ways of looking at it, but it comes from a structured way of looking at the problem, breaking it down to an nth level. And then at that nth level, you can start implementing things to solve that problem.
I'm gonna pick this up from.
Yeah, sure.
So mine is similar, but it involves more work. In fact, so I think I'm gonna just cop one of your styles. In fact, what I essentially do is I break up big. I believe that there's no direct fix to any solution.
Right.
So if I'm dealing with a complex issue, what I try to do is I try to segment it,
Hmm.
and I try to break it down into say 30 smaller problems.
Right.
And then I find an individual fix to each of these 30 problems, which end up being very trivial, like you said. And then I impose, say, a 30-point solution to the issue, which ends up being more holistic and tries to
Right.
fix the issue at a structural
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
But what I have faced with it is that problems often become recurring if I have that approach.
Okay.
So when you said you need to do root level analysis, you're just basic Hegelian A not A. That just makes so much more sense. I'm going to pick that up for you. That's good advice. Oftentimes what I was looking for, like you guys said, principles. When you guys look for a project, often what even I try to do when I'm trying to consult somebody, or even if I am trying to do a project of my own, is I make sure that everything is scalable, replicable, and sustainable.
Right.
Because if a project does not take all three boxes, it is not going to last. If I cannot take the same model and pick it up and say implement it in Sonipat and implement it in Bombay, then the project is not a viable solution to what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
But there are often problems to which there are often no solutions also, right? Wicked problems.
Right.
So if I try to fix something,
Yeah.
I end up creating a gateway to another problem.
Yeah.
If I try to, stop that tap, another one opens up. Have you guys ever been in such a situation?
Yeah, I think wicked problems is a great example, right? And I think this is where I think personally, like the work of consulting stops, and maybe the work of public policy and governmental sort of input begins, right? So with consulting, you're working with an organization that has specific objective in mind. As 180DC, our work is not to create impact directly. Our work is to help the organization get to its objective, right? Now, it's on the organization how they want to frame that impact objective, or how they want to frame their priorities.
Fair.
We are not going to help, like if they want our help in that, we can definitely do it. But like, let's say something as simple as, okay, is like village level girl education a good solution to women employment, right? Now, it depends on the context, but it might not be in particular cases. In particular cases, there's a lot of papers on the fact that like if you like the more a girl gets educated in certain village settings, societal structures are such that their employment chances decreases rather than increasing. Right? That's like a wicked problem. That how do you go about it? So we are we are not tackling problems like that. The problem that we might tackle is that, hey, an organization is trying to educate women in a village setting, and how do we help them maximize the number of women that they're teaching, and maximize the impact that they're having on each student. So that is like a philosophical issue, that like where does like consulting end? Yeah, so I think consulting ends to a point that we are just focused on meeting the objective. In corporate consulting, it's profit is the end objective. In impact consulting, the impact is the end objective, but the way you interpret that impact and how that impact might lead to like a different set of issues is not something that comes under our purview.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Last question, then we'll move on to a casual thought.
Sure, yeah.
Right. So, Debdoot,
Yeah.
you guys, both of you, in fact, are going to be picking up consultancy as a career
Yeah.
in the future as well. Are both of you guys also gunning for social impact consultancy?
So that totally depends. So right now, at least, I'm doing an internship in BCG, and see, in the long term, I would love to do social impact consulting because that's something just brings me happiness. But for the short term, in the organization that I'm going to be working on, that totally depends on the type of projects that they give me. They do have like an impact wing or like a sustainability wing, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be directly placed in that project. I would love to be placed in a project like that, but that's not in my control.
Yeah.
But like, is that what you're hoping for?
Yeah, long term,
That's
I'd
top
love
priority.
to switch to
Yeah.
something that's more impact.
You as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think my career like trajectory, the way I visualize it, is definitely. So I'm joining McKinsey like as an analyst next couple of months, in the next couple of months, and I'll try to like get social impact sustainability projects in my 2 year McKinsey, and then after that I'll definitely pivot to impact consulting. So we have organizations like Samagra, Dalberg, Britspan, etc. So either work with them or work explicitly with impact wings of BCG, McKinsey, Bain, etc. Again, I think personally it's very meaningful, and secondly, I personally think it's more intellectually stimulating than like direct corporate problems. But that's again comes from a very limited perspective of the consulting world that I have. I'm a student, so once I enter, I'll learn more about it. But I assume it to be more intellectually stimulating and meaningful. Yeah.
But like for a student who's like watching this, say
Yeah.
they're in college or
Right.
just finishing up on college,
Right.
say someone wants to get into the consulting space, what's like word of advice that you guys would give?
I think, I think, like think about like why you want to get into consulting. That's a huge consulting is marketed beautifully. Like at least in the kind of settings that we are in, B schools, Ashoka, like it's marketed beautifully in the sense that it's like extremely high paying roles. Like you get to travel, you get to like meet with like CEOs and CFOs from the first year of your job itself. So the pros are marketed very efficiently by the industry. However, it might not be the right fit for everybody. So I think the first step is definitely to understand whether you are an actual like fit to consulting, or are you just like attracted to it because of the um, glamorous marketing of it. So that's one. And secondly, I think once you decide on doing consulting, if you're a first year student, second year student, join a club where you can learn those skills and like start applying them. So 180 DC in Ashoka's context, we have a Ashoka Consulting Club, right? Start like maybe like get a diverse range of experiences in your internships. So don't get like limited to one area. So for example, I had internships in FMCG, in government organizations, in like multinational sort of like steel organizations, etc. So I've had a wide range of experiences, which is very useful in thinking about problems from different lenses, which consulting requires you to. So I think get a wide range of experiences, and then once you reach your third, fourth year, template is pretty simple. Like prepare for the consulting interviews, do your cases with your friends, and you'll probably make it. Yeah.
And also in general, just try to like think about how you can solve the problems around you itself. Like there's so many problems that we face every single day of our lives, right? So just think about what are the different types of solutions, the different types of ways you can go about in solving a problem. How can you actually implement that in your own life? So I think just sort of like developing that kind of a
Yeah.
thinking is going to help a lot in the future.
Hmm.
And of course, like if you don't know why you want to do consulting, you can always explore, like get an internship in the
Hmm.
consulting space.
Yeah.
If you like it, you can always pivot later on in the future.
Yeah.
That's not an issue. But I think it's just that the way of thinking that doesn't come very easily, and that comes with a lot of practice. And the easiest way is to just do that in your life itself with the problems that you face.
I think the like first principle critical thinking
Yeah.
is like at the core of good consulting work, and that's a very transferable skill. Like I'm a philosophy student as well, so like philosophy also helps you like understand and like solve problems from very first principle, like logical level. I think if you learn that skill, even if you want to pivot later on, like it will definitely help you in any aspect of your career. So yeah, I think try to build that skill. And as she mentioned, that problems are all around us, right? Like this, like A not A, as I mentioned, right? There are other ways of thinking about things as well. For example, something called a journey breakdown. So let's say a problem like, oh, I'm getting late to class every day. Okay, why is that happening? Now that's a very like vague problem. How do you figure that out? A consultant would like break down the entire journey step by step. So for example, from the moment you sleep, let's say, so you sleep at this time, you wake up, first thing that you do, second thing that you do, third thing that you do, right? You get from your room to your classroom. How much time does that take? So they'll break that journey down and they'll explore each bucket one by one and see how where the problem might lie and solve accordingly. So something as simple and personal like that can be like structured and thought about in a structured manner. Um, and I think you also like if you want to enter corporate consulting, a general sense of like deep sense of curiosity always helps, even in impact consulting. Like
Yeah.
it's very purpose driven. It's you need to like be extremely curious about a lot of things. So like if tomorrow you get to know that, hey, like um Indigo Airlines is facing like a profitability decline over the last 2 years, right? um like once you get that consulting like cap on, you'll immediately start thinking about why that might be happening. And is it a leadership issue? Is it a cost side issue? Is it a revenue side issue? Whatever. So like you start thinking about things like that.
You look at life differently now.
No, I don't think it's that deep also, but you look at problems differently.
You're
Look
always
at-
questioning everything, like
Yeah.
why is that happening? You just
Yeah.
become more intellectually curious, I think,
Yeah.
because you're just questioning everything around you and like
Mm.
why is that happening? What's the root cause of that?
Mm.
I'm sure you all must make gay boyfriends and girlfriends. Or break everything around now.
Um,
Okay. What was work culture like at 180 DC? What's it like running such a place? How are the people?
I think matlab, personally, I have had different experiences based on the year. So like now I'm the president, so I've had a different experience than as a member. The context of Ashoka is such that students are extremely busy with their coursework and they're all like at all points handling a lot of things at the same time. Which might be different from for other universities, I'm assuming. But so in our case, like everybody is like squeezed out for time, right? So if you get the attention of your teammates for like an hour's meeting, you need to make the most of it, or else like they'll lose motivation and incentive. So I think for us, we try to like keep things to the point. We try to delegate things in a manner that it aligns with that individual skills, and then they're free to like handle that problem in whatever way they want. So let's say we get a client project, we find the two best individuals in the club to handle that project, and then once we choose that, they're free to like handle it in whatever way. If they need our help, if they want our assistance in any way, we are there for them, but they are free to like handle it in whatever way. Even within a client project, let's say when I was the head of a client project, let's say she's handling a certain wing of that project, right? So I'll delegate it to her and then she'll take care of it completely independently. So we try to avoid micromanagement. We try to like enter, like have faith in the kind of work everybody's doing in the club. And yeah, I think it's pretty active like that. I think there are 3 projects going on right now with about 10 to 12 members in each project. So it's pretty active. People hopefully can like take away a lot of lessons and like relationships from this club. So I think it's pretty good.
And yeah, with a structure like this, it's very important to sort of understand the strengths of your own team, right? We try to give projects to people based on, first of all, their interest as well as their strength, because long term, it's very like hard to maintain that sort of incentive or that motivation for people if they're not interested or if they're just not good enough for a specific type of field. So that's very important to understand what is the specialty of a specific person, right? And then you give them a project that more aligns with their interests and goals and all of that. Secondly, it's also very important to sort of give them that big picture of why exactly are we doing this? What is the organization going to be achieving through this? To sort of give that sort of sense of purpose as to why we're working on that project. Like when we're working on a project right now, it might seem too short term, or you wouldn't even know the purpose of it. Like I'm just doing a bunch of secondary research, but why am I doing this? How is this going to benefit the organization? But if you give that sort of like a long term view on the impact that it creates on the organization, that also drives the team more. That's very helpful. And lastly, I just think that being able to communicate very freely with the entire organization, like we're sort of very free with all of our members. They can come tell us anything whenever they want. If they have some sort of time constraints, they just tell us that, and then somebody else will take like step in and take that place, right? So I feel like your team has to be pretty free with how they interact with you, and that generally helps in the long term because people are always accountable. They have the freedom to do what they want when they want, but also they know that they can always come to you and tell you if they need help, because asking for help is very important in a team setting.
What I do to incentivize work is I always make sure there's an appeal to emotion from the get-go. And the second you get somebody to genuinely feel about a problem, then work is much easier to get done. And like you guys said, there's a lot of grunt work that goes into change making. There is a heavy amount of intellectual stuff, but there is also this huge chunk of just brainless grunt work that you need to put in. And you can only influence that kind when people really see the vision that you're trying to show. So it's very important for like people like in your positions to be able to show them, what's the greater goal and the end goal and the end purpose of what you guys are gunning for, to make them see it and then, manage to make it tangible, whatever you guys are working on. If you guys, I want you guys to look in the camera, send a message out to people who are watching this, who made it to the end of this conversation. Send a message. If you were to send a message to somebody watching who's interested in making a difference, change making, just trying to understand the world of social impact, consultancy, go for it.
Right. So I would say that like no matter what age, like what do you call that age?
Bracket.
What age bracket you belong to? I think it's very important to actually feel for a certain problem, right? And like align that purpose with your work. And I have realized in life that when you're working purposefully, you also become more efficient. So like efficiency and purpose don't need to be and like either or problem. If you are purposeful about something, you will become good at it eventually. So like people might think there's a dilemma that the impact sector might not compensate financially as well as the corporate sector, opportunities are less, etc. But I think on an individual level, if you're really purposeful about the kind of work that you're doing and the kind of beneficiaries you want to help and sectors you want to operate in, if you're purposeful about it, if you're like you have an emotional core attached to it, you will be good at it, and you will be good at your career from a very like I don't know, like financial and efficiency level as well. So it goes hand in hand. Don't think that it's a dilemma, because it's not.
So I'd say that life is short. So figure out what you want to do, why you're here in this world, what is the purpose that you want to achieve. Because by the end of it, you wouldn't want to live like 60 years and be like, oh no, what did I achieve in life? What impact did I create on the world? So living a very purposeful life, I think, is important because we barely have any years in this world, right? So just thinking about what kind of impact you can have. It doesn't necessarily have to be social impact. Anything that is of use to people, animals, organizations, that is considered as impact. So just figuring out what you want to do in life, that obviously comes a bit later on as well. You won't have to figure out everything right now, but just seeing, okay, is this something that I like doing? Do I see something valuable out of it? That's sort of like a very important exercise that you can sort of start doing from today. And that's generally helped me a lot in figuring out what kind of a life that I want to live and what kind of purpose I want to bring out of my life. Yeah, I think that's pretty useful.
Follow your intuition.
Yeah.
I think that's
If not you, then who?
Exactly.
Chalo.
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
doing this. Chalo.